Okay, so here we go. I want to tell you a little bit about the history of the Tzadik Raanana, the Ben Lashri, and a personal connection that I have with him. Do you know there's a Rav in Farakaway, Rabbi Klein Kaufman, who worked on the art scroll Ramban, who, as a young boy in the DP camps, slept in the same room as the Ben Lashri. He knew him personally. Okay? The Ben Lashri was born on Shavuos in Taf Reish Nun Vav, 1896. Okay, so over here in your booklet, I hired a Yid to write a little biography about the Ben Lashri for the intro of the Sefer. He was born on Shavuos in Taf Reish Nun Vav. His father was Rav Asher Anshel Hakohein, who was a great masmid. He was muflag b'Torah. He was a kohen meyuchas from the Shach, and his mother was Lata Esther. His name was Yitzchak, named after his mother's father. When he was 7 years old, he was a baki in all of Tanakh Baal Peh. He was a great masmid. When he was 10 years old, he learned his first Rosh Hashiva. You know this name? Rabbi Yaakov Mordechai Zilberman mi Balgoria. I believe the father of one of the Belzer Rebbes. Okay, for Bulgarai, Rabbi Yaakov Mordechai of Bulgarai, who held him in great esteem. When he was 15 years old, he learned by the Shem Shmuel in Sachachav. He was a chavrusa of my great-grandfather. The Ben Lashri was a chavrusa of my great-grandfather in Sachachav. My great-grandfather was the Rav in Sachachav, the last Rav of Sachachav. He was a chavrusa with the Ben Lashri. The reason I'm putting this together is, aside from the great school of it, and aside from the beautiful Torah, my great-grandfather was a very budding Gold of Yisrael. Agudas Yisrael tried to save his life during the Holocaust. They were going to make him, they were going to give him the position of the chief rabbi of the United States of America in 1940, 1941, and he didn't want to leave his kehillah, and he died al Kiddush Hashem in the Warsaw Ghetto. We don't have any writings left from our great-grandfather. So we figured this is a way of preserving the memory of the Zayda by publishing the Torah of his chavrusa. So that's the hidden reason. That's the real reason why we're working on this. Okay, what's interesting is, in those days he became very close to Ger and to the Imrei Emes, and he was nistabe greatly with the Imrei Emes. At 18 years old, he went to learn in Warsaw, by Rav Tzvi Glatstein. You ever hear? You know who this is? Rav Tzvi Glatstein. Tzvi Glatstein was the son-in-law of Reb Chaim Brisker. I believe he was Hasidish. Did you know that? That Reb Chaim had a son-in-law who was a Lamdin Muflag, but also from the Olam HaChasidus, and that's who the Ben Lashri learned by. He was also very close to the Admorei Chabad. He wrote to the Rebbe Rayatz, wanting to be Mukusha with the Rebbe Rayatz, and he was very close with other Tzadikim Muflagim. I want to tell you a little bit about his Mesiras Nefesh and some of the miraculous stories in Siberia, and I'm going to tell you about the letters that I have personally from the Ben Lashri, not that he wrote to me, that he wrote to my grandfather. Okay, so during World War II, he was exiled to Siberia. He worked in back-breaking labor there, and he endured terrible Yisurim. I'm on the second side. He was saved with great miracles. The Ben Lashri says like this: a story happened when the Nazis came into the city. They seized people to work, and I was commanded to dig a pit 2 meters deep and very wide. And in the pit, there was another guma within the pit. And the Nazis went and they took everyone's hat and threw them in the pit. The problem was, when they took my hat, I still had a yarmulke underneath. So the Nazis said to me, "Oh, you're the rabbi over here." And he pushed me into the pit, which the Ben Lashri says that should have killed me. And Bez Hashem, nothing happened. And I was like I was the model for all of them. So the Nazis say, "Hey, you see the rabbi in the pit? It's going to happen to you if you don't listen to me." Meanwhile, the Polacks who were fighting with the Nazis killed one of their horses. So the Nazi says, take the dead horse and throw it into the pit on top of the rabbi. So basically, his life was in double jeopardy. And the people started begging the Nazis, no, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. And out of nowhere, the general started to shout, the war is continuing, what are you fooling around over here? And miraculously, they walked away from there. And they were able to take me out of the pit. And the Ben Lashri says, I was saved miraculously, and I was appointed min hashamayim to be mevakesh rachamim al bnei Yisrael. If you want to know where the Koach HaTfilah Ben Lashri came from, it was from this neder he made. He says, David HaMelech said, Hashem ha'elisa oisi min sha'oil. Why? Sha'oil is a lashon of she'ela, that if you're saved from the sha'oil, it's so that you could be sha'oil rachamim on Klal Yisrael. That's where this came from. I want to tell you one more story that he brings over here. During the war, I was taken to forced labor, and I was concerned that they were going to force me to work on Shabbos. So what did I do? On one Friday, when the next day I was afraid they were going to force me to work on Shabbos, I took my finger, he says, and I cut off my finger. I removed my finger, hoping if I'm in such pain and blood is gushing forth, they wouldn't make me do avodah. So he says, but I'm a kohen, and mehira yibana beis hamikdash, and I'm a kohen meyuchas, and now that I'm balmum, I'll never be able to do the avodah in the beis hamikdash. Mutav ve'efsal milavoid bebeis hamikdash v'loy achalel Shabbos achas. Better to be puzzled from doing the avodah in the beis hamikdash than desecrating Shabbos. Now I'm going to tell you one more story. During the War of Independence, the Ben Lashri predicted that the war would break out. And the Beis Yisrael predicted the war would not break out. And the Beis Yisrael said, I don't see it, I'm not seeing it, the Ben Lashri sees it, and I defer to the Ben Lashri. He has better vision. Here, I'll read to you the story. He says, Pamim hayimagala pesher ma'irois hamasrach shois ba'olam. Sometimes he would reveal different happenings in the world. V'chein divrei asidus, he would reveal the future. Kagoin bizman mechemes Yom HaKippurim. Sorry, Yom Kippur War, not the War of Independence. He spoke about that with great bechiyos, and he would stand in tefillah for many hours, and he said many lofty things.
Sephardic feel because it's Ben Ishchai, Ben Ashlosh.
No, it's not Sephardic. He's Hasidish.
Not, as you're saying, all of the feelings that he got in the first.
He was from Belz, Sachachav. He was a Toishev of Sachachav. He was affiliated with Belz, Chabad, Ger. Now, one more story. Okay, so you say, okay, this is Hasidish Shemaisis over here. What did the Olam HaYeshivas think of him? Okay, one last story. I'm going to tell you a story from an individual that if I were to ask you, who would be the last person to say that someone in the last 100 years had Gilui Elyo? In other words, I would say, tell me a Gadol, who would be the last person to say over a Maisa that somebody had Gilui Elyo? Who do you think that would be? Like, who would be the last person? Maybe Rabbi Yashiv, right? Rabbi Aaron Leib Steinman. Rabbi Aaron Leib Steinman, if he's telling a story, if he's telling the story, then that's how it happened. Okay? Here it goes. You ready? This is printed in a sefer about Rabbi Aaron Leib Steinman. It's called Ala Tamar. Yadua, shezacha legiluyim shamayim eskam ledargas gois. We know the Ben Lashri was privy to great revelations and to very high levels. Makubal shayel Eliyahu Hanavi shchiach etzai. It is known that Eliyahu Hanavi frequented him, and there are many stories about this. In the Sefer E'el El Tamar, Reb Aaron Leib Steinman said that he heard from trustworthy Eidim that they asked the Ben Lashri a very complicated question, and he said, no problem, I'm going to be a Sandik tomorrow, I'll just ask Eliyahu Hanavi tomorrow. And whatever he tells me, I'll let you know. And Rabbi Aaron Leib Steinman said, I don't know why the Ben Lashri was Zocha to Eliyahu. Could be because of his great hasmada. Could be he was never nenem min olam hazeh. He lived in great poverty. I know personally my grandfather would send him money regularly, and the Ben Lashri said he's so poor he doesn't even have enough money to buy a talis katan. I personally have envelopes the Ben Lashri sent. He wrote on the inside of the envelope because he couldn't afford the paper. And okay, so that's a little bit about the history of the Ben Lashri. When my father was 17 years old, he made his way to Raanana. He trekked through the forest to the hut of the Ben Lashri. At that point of time, the Ben Lashri was blind. All you could see were the white of his eyes. And in the psicha of the Sefer, the Ben Lashri took one quote-unquote look at my father, and he said, in Gansin Endlach zum Zaida, you look exactly like your grandfather. The only thing is Ben Lashri couldn't see. Anyway, my grandfather, I have about 50 letters from the Ben Lashri, and he asked my father, the Ben Lashri had sent to my grandfather in Pittsburgh his Sfarim to disseminate, and he told my father, make sure you ask your father, my grandfather, make sure he gives out the Sfarim. So that's like a family command. I have to give out the Sfarim of the Ben Lashri. So anyway, again, like we mentioned, if anybody wants to be Mishtatev, that's available. And I want to just share with you a few Divrei Torah and Pasha Shemais from the Ben Lashri.